keep a business card in my wallet. I don't really know why I keep it in my wallet. It's the business card of a man named Raymond Reeves. Raymond Reeves was a jeweler at the Markman's Jewelry Store in Knoxville, Tennessee. I met Raymond in December of 2006 when I went there to purchase an engagement ring for Rebecca. I was planning to propose to her while we were studying abroad the next semester, and my parents, her parents, and my grandparents were the ones who were aware that that was the plan. And so at Thanksgiving that year, my grandmother invited me over to their condo, and we sat down, and she told me the story of her engagement ring, how my granddaddy had had to work extra hours, hot days in a tobacco field picking tobacco, and saved all his money to buy the lone diamond that sat in her engagement ring. It sat down in a hold there that had little hearts etched on the outside of it. And at the end of telling me this story of how she had been given this engagement ring, she said, "I'd like to offer it to you to use when you propose to Rebecca." So moved by her generosity, of course, I accepted this gift, and I went to the jewelry store, and that's where I met Raymond Reeves. And here I learned a lesson about diamonds. There are 4 C's that you use to grade a diamond: clarity, cut, carat, and color. Clarity refers to the purity of light that can pass through the diamond. It's a measure by which you just say if the diamond is pure or if it's flawed. And the flaws that are there are either inclusions that have formed within the diamond as it formed in the earth, or they're flaws that came about while the diamond was being cut into its shape. And so I met with Raymond, and he looked at my grandmother's diamond through his eyeglass, and then he sucked the air in through his teeth. "This diamond has a flaw in it," he said. "It doesn't reflect the light purely. I won't be able to match it, to use it with any of the diamonds that we have here in the store. We wouldn't sell anybody a diamond that looked like this. Are you sure you want to use it?" Now, Raymond was right. By the jeweler's standards, this diamond was flawed. It did not measure up to the beauty standards of the diamond industry to say that it was worthy. It was not pure. So today in our sermon series, we are looking at this beatitude of Jesus where he says, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God." Now, I would imagine if we were to use the standards of measure that we use to define the worth of a diamond, we would consider ourselves then #blessed if we had things that are pure, they're worthy. A pure diamond with no inclusions. That perfectly pure tomato that's growing on the vine. Going and adopting a purebred dog. There's even a brand of ice cream and milk that is called purity. If a baseball player strikes the ball consistently and solidly every single time, we say that guy is a pure hitter. You can even buy golf balls that are advertised as being pure soft. So you can see in marketing, there's this desire in people to have things that are pure. Having something pure is having something better, something unblemished, rare. It's the model by which all the lesser things are measured. And so we think, finally we come to a beatitude that matches up with our secular understanding of being #blessed. Those who have pure marble countertops, pure skin, pure produce, the best of all things. They are the ones closest to God because they have the best stuff. Doesn't that make it work? Finally, it's taken us however many weeks to get to this place where we have a beatitude that makes sense. Except, of course, Jesus' words are not about this kind of generic purity. It's a purity of heart. A heart that longs for God above all other things. In Eric Kobel's book, the author says, purity of heart is a profoundly interior experience. It is the bliss that attends when we hoist the weight of our worries from our shoulders and commune in blessed simplicity with a God whose only concern is that we have none, who lifts our kites and lets it soar to the skies unencumbered by the tug of baser impulses. A pure heart is a heart that is in communion with God, where our other anxieties, fears, and uncertainties can fall away from us. Perhaps that's why Jesus calls over this toddler when his disciples approach him and ask, now who is the greatest, Jesus, in the kingdom of heaven? I like to imagine at this moment that the disciple Matthew was a tax collector, so he was good with spreadsheets. My guess is that Matthew's had a spreadsheet on this entire disciple journey, and he's been keeping track of all the disciples' performance in the midst of their ministry training course. Or maybe he has a star chart, and beside each disciple's name, he gives them a sticker, a star sticker for the good that they've done toward the kingdom of heaven, kind of like the way my piano teacher as a child used to track whether I'd practiced enough in the previous week. And so as he learns about the kingdom of God, the kingdom of heaven, Jesus teaches, he puts a sticker next to each person's name. So who's the best at loving their neighbor, or showing patience, or offering compassion, or healing the sick, or speaking the truth of God? And so the disciples have been huddled together around Matthew's spreadsheet tabulations, trying to figure out who's at the top of the point total, like you try with every year's NASCAR race series. Who's at the top of the poll? And they've got some disputes. They need some rule clarifying. And so they go to the judge. They go to Rabbi Jesus, and they have their scorebook. And Jesus has this child. And so this toddler with jelly on her hands and a full diaper, she toddles over. She babbles over Jesus while he's trying to talk. She's trying to pick up the sand and put it in her mouth. She's poking at the toes of the disciples through their sandals. And note, it's important, if you've ever heard this story in the other Gospels, to pay attention to how Jesus speaks in Matthew's Gospel. He doesn't look down at this child and say, now, y'all need to be nice to this kid. He doesn't open by saying, welcome this child. His first words aren't, little children are the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Nope. Unless you change and become like children. It isn't a scorekeeping exercise, this kingdom of heaven admission. It's an acting class. Learn to act like children. But what does that mean? So Jesus specifies, whoever becomes humble like this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Humility, therefore, is the defining marker for one who is pure in heart. So often the opposite of humility, our pride, is born out of our anxiety. We worry about that report that's due at work, or the report card that's coming home from school. We need to get out and purchase a new vehicle. We need to get a new air conditioner. The house needs to be painted. We worry about the leaks that are in the basement, the aging dog in the house, what our teenagers are up to when they take off in the car, or what the teenagers will be up to when they take off to college. And that's when we're not in the middle of a pandemic and we're anxious about schools reopening and whether it's safe to get our hair cut or get our teeth cleaned. Throw in then some decay that continues to go on with our trust in institutions like government and the church and civic organizations and neighborhood associations and the like. And we feel alone, as if we're carrying all the decisions of the world on our own shoulders. We are the ultimate arbiter of good and bad, which really doesn't feel all that good. It just weighs us down, and we most likely feel like we aren't actually measuring up. And so we make up for that anxiety. We make up for that sense of worthlessness by touting what we do well in front of others, or at least diminishing the ones who don't do things as well as we do. And we clutter our minds and our hearts so that God becomes a distant memory, lost in an innocence from an age long ago. So contrast that life of anxieties, worries, fears, this need to prove ourselves and puff ourselves up with our pride. Contrast that with this story that I experienced last week. We went on vacation recently with 2 other minister families. This is the 8th summer that we've gone on vacation together. The children in the group now outnumber the adults 7-6. We were at the lake, and one of the kids with us was a 4-year-old. His name was Paxton, and he and I were swimming in the lake together in our life jackets. Paxton took off away from me, swimming in his float towards something that was bobbing on the top of the water. I wasn't sure what it was, but I couldn't chase him down fast enough. And he grabbed it, and he pulled this object out of the water, and he said, "Look! Look at this beautiful reef!" Now, this was a brown, decaying, sopping wet maple leaf. It was not beautiful by the standards of measure that you would use at the jewelry store. But jaded as I am about beautiful things, because I have shopped for diamonds, I wanted to comfort the child, and so I said, "Wow, that's beautiful." Well, Paxton spent most of the rest of the afternoon swimming around in the lake and continuing to collect beautiful weaves, so that when it was time to get out of the water and he swam over to the stairs to get back on the dock, he couldn't grab the handrail because his hands were full. And so he had to be picked up and placed on the dock, and immediately went running over to the corner where he carefully stacked all the leaves in a pile and put his flip-flops on top so that they wouldn't blow away this priceless treasure, his beautiful weaves. The pure in heart, they can see God. Those who become humble like this child will be the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Those who can learn to value how a diamond with an inclusion can represent 60 years of faithful marriage and the generosity of a grandmother passing on that heritage to another and not see a flawed stone. Those who have that kind of eye will see God. Those who collect beautiful weaves and carefully stack them like priceless treasure, they are the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And on this day, in this service of worship, a precious girl dressed in white, who giggles and cries and who messes and smiles, who is adored by her parents and countless aunts, uncles, cousins, and grandparents, brought forward in the midst of a pandemic where painter's tape carefully marks the pews of who can sit where, as worshipers gather here and worshipers gather online, where vows are made to be an example and affirmed in person or shouted at the television camera, or affirmations texted in or sent via Insta video to mom. Water that just came out of the tap that sticks out from the coffee maker, but sprinkled on a head and ancient words spoken of sin and grace, death and resurrection, hope and covenant, spoken in a world that so much appears as though all mystery has evaporated. Some would see this exercise as depressing on a day like this, as silly, unnecessary, superstitious. But we say that in such a moment, we see God. In such a moment, our hearts are purified. In this moment, we no longer worry about the anxieties of this day, but we let them fall away and no longer define our worth, because we gather today to celebrate a God who knows us through and through and who loves us still and all. And so what else is there to do than to praise God, from whom all #blessings